Okay, here we go. 5.2. We're just going to do the first little bit of 5.2, not 5.3, 5.2. And what this section is about, we're going to start it today. We're going to come back. We're going to finish the bulk of it on Tuesday. We are going to factor what's called trinomials. Again, I'm guessing you probably had some experience with this. If you do, great. If you don't, we're going to learn all about it. The prefix tri means three. So we're going to, in this section, learn how to factor things that have three terms. And what's going to be the characteristic of everything we do today in the next 25 minutes is the things that we factor are going to have a 1 in front of the x squared. So when you're doing your homework for 5.2 tonight or tomorrow before you head into the weekend, you can do anything in 5.2 that has a 1 in front of the square. The second you encounter something that has another number, stop. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about on Tuesday. Now, before we do this, I just want to remind us, we've mentioned this a couple times, but we haven't actually done this. I just want to remind ourselves about how to multiply, because remember, factoring is unmultiplying. So I just want to look at what it means to multiply these two things together. So you said earlier that somebody in your math past has taught you when you multiply two binomials, there's an acronym, it's FOIL. All it is a way to remember to multiply all four different pairs of things. So when I go to multiply this together, what two terms here represent my firsts? Okay. The x and the x. Okay. Those are my firsts. X times x gives me x squared. And I'm just going to write a little f right on top of it. What two terms represent my outers? The x and the 5. Those are the outsides. Okay, that gives me 5x. I'm going to put a little O over it. Those came from my outers. What two terms came from what two terms are my inners? The ones that are closest to each other are the inners. So that's 9x. Put a little I right there. And then my lasts are what? Yeah, those are the only two that are left. The 9 and the 5, and that's 45. So that's my lasts. So even if you don't know the acronym is not super important. It's just a way to remember I have four pairs of things to multiply together. Are we all on the same page? You remember seeing this at some point in your math past? If you haven't, let's talk after class, because this is something I assume that you've seen before. Okay, it's kind of it's prerequisite knowledge. Here's what I want to observe here as far as today in factoring is concerned. My x squared, this leading term, came from my firsts. Okay, so that x squared, when I encounter factoring, when I'm going to be going up the ladder in a minute, when I'm going to start with something down here, and I'm going to write it as a product, that this x squared term, that came from my firsts. And the plus 45 here at the end, that came from my last. So we used 9 and 5. 9 times 5 gave me this 45. So I'm just looking at the structure. This first term came from the firsts. The last term came from the lasts. And then what helps me unlock the secret then is that the outers and the inners combine to give me the middle. So the particular factors of 45, the particular factors of the last that I use are what's going to add up to the middle term. So 9 and 5 turns out to be 14x. So now what we're going to do is we are going to start with trinomials, these things right here, and then we are going to end up with something that looks like this. So I just wanted you to see, because it's probably been a while, you probably don't sit at home as a hobby foiling binomials together, who would? What I wanted you to see is that whatever my factors of the last, the factors that I choose have to add up, because they're the outers and inners, have to add up to this middle bit. When we come back on Tuesday, there'll be a different number here, and there's going to be a different process for how to do that, because we'll have to take that number into account. But for now, since it's a 1 times anything is just itself. So I don't even have to worry about that. So here's my first example. X squared plus 13x plus 30. So it's a trinomial. I've got a 1 in front of the squared. So I'm just basically unfoiling this. So I'm going to draw a couple parentheses here, and you're going to help me answer a couple questions. My firsts, give me x squared. So what's the only option that I have for my firsts in my two binomials? X and x. Okay, that's why we're jetting through this, because this is the simpler, not easy, but it's the simpler situation. The second thing I want you to observe is my lasts give me a positive. Okay, this is positive. When you multiply, how can you get a positive when you multiply two things together? I'm sorry, what'd you say? Okay, a positive times a positive, or a negative times a negative. So here's what you need to remember. When your lasts are positive, that tells you the signs are the same. They have to be. Two positives or two negatives. Well, how do I know which one to use? What was that? You look in the middle, certainly. I have to add up to a positive 13. So that means, am I going to use the two positives or the two negatives? I'm going to use the two positives. Great. Same signs, both positive. And now the question. If you have your calculator, if you need your calculator, I understand. Some of us are better at multiplication tables than others, and there's nothing wrong with that. What are the two factors of 30 that add up to 13? 10 and 3. If you thought 6 and 5 right away, that's a great choice, but that adds up to 11. But write it down so that you know you've already used it. And then notice, if you're wondering, how do I know other factors? That's a great question. Notice 6 is 2 times 3, right? So take either the 2 or the 3 and put it over here. So if 6 is 2 times 3, then I'll take the 3, and then that leaves, how many times does 3 go into 30? 10, just using my calculator. 6 is 2 times 3. What if it was 2? Well, how many times does 2 go into 30? 15. There's another pair of factors. And then there's always 1 times whatever. So there's always 1 times 30. So just trying to give you a little process here to generate other pairs of factors in case you don't know. Okay, I'm sure we don't have all the factors of 30 or 48 or 64 memorized, and I wouldn't want you to, but you need to be able to figure it out. So all I did is, I'm sure you know one pair of factors. Once you know one pair, then you can move the factors around to figure out the others. So you said 10 and 3. That's great. Let's check this real quick. 10 times 3 gives me 30, my lasts. 10 plus 3 gives me 13, my outers and inners. And there we go. We're done with the problem. I've got 3 or 4 that you're going to do. So here's your first one. Nice, relaxing numbers because it's Thursday. We're already thinking about lunch. Here you go. Y squared plus 9y plus 14. All right, here goes. My firsts give me y squared. What's the only option for my firsts? Okay, y times y. This is a plus 14. What does that tell me about my signs? They got to be the same, and then you're looking ahead. They got to both be positive. You're 100% right. Great job. And then what are the factors of 14 that are going to add up to 9? 7 and 2, 2 and 7, it does not matter what order you put those in. You can have these two factors in either order. So if you got the plus 2 here, the plus 7 there, 100% correct. Don't erase. Here's the next one. X squared plus 13x plus 36. Go for it. Okay, x squared, I'm only going to ask you this a couple more times, I promise, because I know the answer is fairly obvious. What are my only options for the firsts? Okay, great, x and x. This plus 36 tells me what about my signs? They're going to be the same sign, that's exactly right. So what signs am I going to use? Both positive, yes. And then what are the factors of 36 that are going to add up to 13? Okay, 9 and 4, great, or 4 and 9. And again, if you didn't see that right away, there's got to be a pair of factors, or if you don't know, 36 is even, start with 2. 36 is 2 times 18. And now you can move the factors of 18 around and come up with 9 and 4. I've promised you on the test, everything will be factorable. There's no tricks or gimmicks. So bring your calculator or borrow one of mine so that you can figure out what the factors are going to be. Here's another one. T squared minus 12t plus 20. All right, this is it. Last time I asked this particular question. What are the only options for the firsts on this problem? Yep, t times t. The 20 tells me what about my signs? They're going to be the same, but this time, because I changed a little something, what signs are you going to use? Both negative, yes, because it's a negative 12 this time. And what are the two factors of 20 that add up to 12? That's right, 10 and 2. Okay, one more of problems like this, and then I'm going to make one more change, and we've got 5 more problems. So x squared minus 5x plus 6. My only options for the x squared are x and x. The plus 6 tells me that my signs have to be the same because remember, this is my last. I multiply to get this term. So my signs have to be the same. This tells me they're both going to be negative. And what are the two factors of 6 that are going to add up to 5? 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. The order absolutely does not matter. Okay, my last example for the day. Then you have a few problems and then you're going to be done. And I know another week of math is over. It's heartbreaking. X squared minus 8x minus 20. And we're going to do this one together. Although some of you probably haven't done already because you've done this before. The x squared is x times x. Now this time I've changed the sign on my last. It's now a negative. What's the only way to get a negative when you multiply two things together? Positive times a negative or negative positive, doesn't matter. Okay, you got to have one of each sign. Okay, so plus, minus, or minus plus, the order is immaterial. Now this causes me though to change my mindset just a little bit. Okay, I erased all the problems I should have. When we have the same signs, remember we add the values of the numbers because they're going in the same direction on the number line. Either both going in the positive direction or they're both going in the negative direction. They're increasing each other. When I'm adding two numbers with different signs, positives and negatives, they're now combating each other. They're going against each other. So what do I do with the values of the numbers when I add things with different signs? Some teacher in middle school taught you to add integers. What do you do with the values? When I add -9 and +5, what do I do with the values of the numbers to figure out what this is? What's that? You subtract it, take the difference, because they're moving in different directions on the number line. The -9's going in one way, the 5's going the other, and so you take the difference. And so that's why it's going to be -4. Okay, so just reminding you of that, our mindset has to change a little bit. So now I'm not looking for the two factors of 20 that add up to 8. I'm looking for the two factors of 20 that have a difference of 8. And what are those two numbers? We just used them. 10 and 2. Last question. If I use 10 and 2, which one gets the honor of being the -1 and which one gets the honor of being the +1? Why did you pick 10 to be the -1? It's 100% right. You take the difference and you get the 8, and then the sign goes with the larger value. So the -10, because the -1 wins, it ends up being -8 right there. Okay, so all of this is signed arithmetic with adding and subtracting. So we get to practice that. So here we go. 3 problems from the finish line for you. X squared minus 2x minus 8. The only option for my firsts, x and x. Since the 8 is negative, that tells me my signs have to be opposites, either plus or minus, plus, minus, minus, plus, the order doesn't matter. And what are the two factors of 8 that are 2 apart? 4 and 2, which one's positive and which one's negative? 2 is positive, 4 is negative. Now, it doesn't matter if you put the negative here, positive here, but what does matter is the 4 has to be negative. So your 4 is with your minus sign wherever you put it. Here is your second to last problem. Y squared minus y minus 30. Y squared, my only choice, y times y. The 30 is negative. That tells me my signs have to be different. So minus and plus, or plus and minus. Order doesn't matter. And now what are the factors of 30 that are going to be 1 apart? 5 and 6. And so which one's going to be the -1? Which one's the positive one? 6 is negative because the -1 wins. The 5 is positive. Here's the very last problem. I've got x squared, then plus 5xy minus 24y squared. Now, if you don't know what to do with this y squared, just cover it up with your thumb. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it at the end. So factor this problem just like we've been doing the others. And then if you know what to do with it, great. If you don't, it's going to be a nice simple step. All right, so my x squared is x times x. 24 is negative, tells me positive, negative, or negative, positive. What are the two factors of 24 that are going to be 5 apart? 8 and 3 are, and so I'm going to make the 8 the positive one because it's a +5. The bigger one wins. So 8 and 3. And then the last thing is I have a y squared on this one. All that means to do is nothing more complicated than saying, okay, I'm gonna have a y here and a y there. So the term becomes 8y and 3y. And that's where the 24y squared comes from. Before I shut off the video, any questions, comments, concerns about factoring things with a 1 in front of the leading term? So that's where we are when you go to do the homework. Okay, you can do the things that have a 1 in front of the squared term.